Hello again, my little conscript, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. Today's episode is going to be a quick tip tactica, where we deep dive some guard tactics and crunchy combos. And this time, we are going to be casting our critical eyes over something that I like to call the Creed Command Blob. If you like cheap orders for your vehicles, if you like having enough orders for your artillery for pretty much your entire army, if you like to just solve the order bottleneck, then this combo is for you. And so without further ado, let's not mess around today. Let's mount up, roll out, and drive the men right into this thing. Now, first things first, I want to lay the groundwork. One of the things that makes Imperial Guard so good, one of the things that makes our army sing and basically function is the order mechanic. That's our army rule. This essentially allows us to hand out a number of free and sometimes very powerful buffs across various units in our army. For example, we've got orders like Take Aim, which just fundamentally solve our pretty crappy ballistic skill. And we've also got orders like Take Cover, which help us get a bit more durability, especially on those squishy units like our infantry. Myself and many others in the Guard community tend to say that outside of some specific circumstances, a Guard unit without an order is almost not worth the paper it's written on. But the big thing is that these orders come from specific units. They come from officers. And so sometimes your officers can feel a bit like a tax, especially if you're paying like 65 points for one order from a command squad. This is where the idea of order efficiency, of managing your order economy comes in. You want to try and get as many orders as you can for as many of your units as you can, but do it for the lowest price point. If you end up just adding a command squad to each blob, you're going to end up paying a lot of points on officers, and that's going to take points away from the rest of your army. You might not be able to get all the tanks you want, all the artillery you want. So any way that we can get lots of orders for cheap is something that you definitely want to be keeping an eye on. And this is what makes the Creed Command Blob so important, because when fully tuned up, this thing can do 5 orders, and it can do them to vehicles as well as to infantry. If you're a veteran player who's been using the Guard Index and you're familiar with the concept of the Supreme Command Blob, where we take the Lord Solar and so on and so forth, this concept is going to be pretty similar to that, except for it's going to be significantly cheaper. You're going to get more orders and they're going to be cheaper than your old Index Command Blob. So with all of that said, now let's get into the nitty-gritty detail. The first thing we need to acknowledge is that this only works in the combined arms detachment. You probably could make it work to a much lesser extent in other detachments, but fundamentally this tactic is built around the combined arms detachment. The good news is that the combined arms detachment is one of our best attachments. Not only is it incredibly flexible, catering to a wide array of Guard units, but it's also really powerful, giving out lethal hits left, right, and center. So this isn't a niche tactic that only works with a specific detachment in a specific place, blah, 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 and it's one that you wouldn't normally take. This is something that I think most Guard players can slot into a lot of their army lists without much effort. And this is the first positive of the Creed Command Blob, ease of access. This is something that I think a lot of Guard players are going to find becomes an auto-include in their armies. But okay. Enough hyperbole. Let's get into the actual specifics. The first thing we need to recognize is we're going to need 2 things from the combined arms attachment, an enhancement and a stratagem. The enhancement is going to be Grand Strategist. This is an officer model only, and in your command phase, the bearer can issue 1 additional order. We're also going to need the stratagem Flexible Command, which for 2 CP essentially allows our officers to issue orders to regiment units and to squadron units. Now, we're going to come back to these 2 things in just a moment, but just keep them at the back of your mind. We're also going to need, unsurprisingly, Ursula Creed for the Creed Command Blob.
Fresh meat.
Now, I've already done a deep dive on Creed. Make sure to check it out if you haven't already seen it. But for today's video, the important thing that we're looking at is going to be the fact that she can do 3 orders and the fact that she has the Tactical Genius ability. Now, as it's written down in the codex, that's actually a mistake. It has been FAQ'd. This ability allows you to pick one stratagem and make it cost 1 less CP. This is going to be very, very important. We're also going to need a Cadian command squad. Once again, I have done a deep dive on this unit, so make sure you check that out. And for today's episode, we just need to focus on, again, 2 bits. We need to look at how many orders this officer can do, which currently says 1. That will be changing. And we're also looking at the Master Vox, where we can do orders up to 24 inches away. Lastly, we're going to need a Cadian shock troop unit. This is going to be between 10 and 20 strong, depending on how we're going to implement the Creed command blob. You don't really need to worry too much about this datasheet. We just need to keep an eye on this Voxcaster ability, which is going to potentially allow us to farm some command points. Now, I have done deep dives on all of those units, as I said a couple of times, and I'll make sure that there's links to those videos down in the description below. To be clear, you don't need to watch those videos to understand this tactic. I just think some people might be curious to know a bit more about those units. So you can watch them if you think they'll be useful. So now that we've got the enhancement, the stratagem, and the datasheets, how do we put this all together to make this tactic work? The first thing you're going to want to do is to combine the datasheets. Now, you can do this thanks to the Cadian Shock Troops little ability down here, which states that it can have up to 2 leaders attached to the squad. Now, this can be a 10-man blob or a 20-man blob, but you can attach both Creed and the command squad to this unit. The reason you want to do this is because you want Creed to have access to the Cadian command squad's Master Vox. Because if you read this precisely, it says each time the officer in the bearer's unit issues an order, it can issue it to an eligible unit up to 24 inches away. Now, if we're in a combined unit, then the officer is not just the platoon command squad, but it is also Creed. So that means you could have Creed using the Master Vox because they're all one unit at this point. And the reason that's important is because Creed can do 3 orders, but normally she can only do her orders in a 6-inch bubble. Now, having 5 orders is great, but having them in a really, really limited space in the battlefield makes it very hard to implement them. You're going to have orders to spare, essentially. Being able to use the Master Vox means that you can spaff out those orders 24 inches. And that is going to give you huge range on those orders. It's going to give you huge tactical flexibility. And it's going to mean you can have units on the left flank pushing forward, units on the right flank pushing forward. Creed sat in the middle, probably behind an L-shaped ruin in your deployment zone, acting as a command node, buffing up huge parts of your army. And often some of the punchiest parts as well. So, all right, we've taken the command squad and the Cadian squad and Creed, we've mashed them all together, and now Creed can do the orders a long distance. That's pretty straightforward. Where does the vehicle thing come in? Because if you look at Creed's datasheet, it says she can only order regiment units, and so that doesn't mean tanks. This is where we start combining Grand Strategist with Flexible Command, because we can go from 3 orders to 5 orders, and we can start issuing those orders to vehicles. Grand Strategist, now you cannot put that on Creed, because she is an epic hero, and epic heroes cannot have enhancements. They basically come with everything they can have. But you can put this on the platoon commander. So suddenly your platoon commander is doing 2 orders. Combine that with Creed's 3 orders, and we've got 5 orders. Once we've got our 5 orders, we then want to start looking at flexible command. Now, this normally costs 2 command points, but thanks to Creed's Tactical Genius ability that I highlighted earlier, it's only going to cost you 1 command point. And this is eminently more affordable. So what this means is you can target any number of Astra Militarum officer units from your army. So you can target Creed and you can target the platoon commander or the Cadian commander. In fact, you could target more officers than that. This could be really wide and it could affect every officer in your army, and there's no reason not to just put it on every officer. But we're going to focus on what it does for Creed and the Cadian Commander for now. So you target both of those officers, and now they can issue orders not only to regiment units, but also to squadron units. So now they can order your Leman Russes, they can order your Rogel Dawns, they can order all of it.
I need a perimeter as far back as 39th. Why the hell should I take orders from you?
And there's a couple of real Brucey bonuses here. Firstly, this could cost you 0 CP. Remember, not the Master Vox, but the Voxcast ability from the Cadian datasheet. You will be targeting this unit with this stratagem. That will trigger the Voxcaster ability, which means, and if you read it, on a 4+, you'll get that CP back. If you are running a 20-man blob, you'll have 2 Voxcasters in that unit. That will give you 2 chances to roll that 4+. Statistically, that means you get the CP back. So for the low price of 0 net CP, because you'll spend 1 and then you'll gain 1, you can do this tactic every single turn. And the second big reason is protecting your orders. You see, you could probably save a few points. Instead of taking like 5 Leman Russes and then the Creed Command Blob, you could just take 3 Leman Russes and a couple of tank commanders, give one of those grand strategies, and oh look, we're up to 5 orders, right? So why the hell am I bothering with this whole Creed thing? Those tank commanders are going to be a very high priority for your opponent to destroy. And when they destroy them, they're going to start knocking the orders out from the rest of the tank fleet. You know, if they only have to kill 2 out of 5 Russes to essentially neutralize 5 Russes, because like we said, an Imperial Guard unit without an order on it is basically not worth the paper it's written on, then that's a really obvious failure point. Now, that means you could not use your tank commanders, you could protect them, but then you're spending so many points and you're not even getting the most out of them. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, you can save some points going down the Leman Russ, just focusing on the tank commander's route, but it does put your orders at risk. The Creed Command Blob can happily sit behind a L-shaped ruin. If you go for a 10-man squad plus a command blob plus Creed, and you have a dedicated command blob, you can put it behind an L-shaped ruin in your deployment zone. Your opponent's you're not going to get to it because no one really takes that much indirect fire anymore. There might be a bit more coming in with like the Eldar Codex, people trying to counter the Eldar Codex, for example. But generally speaking, you'll be able to protect it, you'll be able to screen it, and so your orders will be safe. However, there is a way of having your cake and eating it. You can have all of the orders that you want, and you can have all of your units actively pushing forward as part of the offensive. Because up until this point, we've kind of been focusing on this as a dedicated unit that's just going to sit at the back of the board, maybe on the home objective. And that's fine, you can do it that way. But that's actually quite a significant points investment. We've got basically 65 times 3. 65 points for the command squad, 65 points for the Cadian squad, 65 points for Creed. That's going to come out to about 195 points, I believe. That's still cheaper than taking the Lord Solar command block, which I think is up to like 280 points now. So it's still significantly cheaper than that. But it's still basically the cost of a tank just sitting at the back of the board. I get that. If you're willing to risk it a little bit, you could just add Creed onto an existing blob. You see, you're probably, especially in a combined arms detachment, which generally focus on taking a mixture of infantry, tanks, and artillery, you're probably going to have a blob of infantry in your army anyway. You're probably going to have like a blob, at least one. Arguably, you're probably going to have 3, 4, 5 blobs of infantry. So why make a dedicated separate unit? Why not just go, okay, well, I've already got a blob of Cadians. I've already, let's say, given them a command squad. So the only thing I really need to do for this is buy 1 Creed and buy 1 Grand Strategist. That's not a 295 point investment at time of recording. That is an 80 point investment at time of recording. That is eminently more affordable. Yes, it's a little riskier because Creed's going to start pushing forward, and then we start getting into what we said before about your orders being able to be targeted. That could be a problem. Of course. But I think you could use this blob that's pushing forward as a second wave. I've done this quite a few times in tournament games. I generally like to push forward with all of my infantry and all my tanks all the time to keep the offensive going. But sometimes you want to stage things up. You don't want to push everything out there because 40k is a super lethal game. So you push everything out, everything dies, right? So what you end up doing is you're sort of staging your units around various L shapes, but everyone's generally going forward. And what I have done with my Creed command blob, both in index times, I've done this with my Lord Solar command blob as well in index times, and I've done it in codex times as well, is to basically be like, look, this blob is pushing forward, but there's going to be other blobs that are going to be going on to the objectives first. This one instead is going to be like a second or third wave. It's going to come out around turn 3, around turn 4, when units have already been mostly battered on both sides, and it gives me an extra injection of forces. And let me tell you, it can actually be a really, really potent strategy because they're still part of the offense. They're not just sitting at the back doing nothing. They're still near the mid-board. But let's say both sides have been battering each other. There's been smashing and smashing and smashing. Tanks are dead on both sides. Infantry dead on both sides. And then suddenly, a unit which your opponent has kind of like mentally not taken into account because it's just been sat there a little bit. Like, yeah, it's been near the middle of the board, but it's just been near no man's land, I should say. But it's just sort of just been sat there. Suddenly activates, gets into the fight. It's another wave. It's another 20-man blob with Creed with command. That's a 26-man unit pushing onto it. Sometimes by turn 4 to 5, they don't have what they need to deal with that. So not only does it end up keeping your orders alive, because this is coming in a bit later in the game, but it's also adding into part of your offensive strategy. And you're not having to have a dedicated unit, which is potentially quite points intensive. One last thing to mention about this whole thing. We've been looking at this through the lens of ordering big, expensive vehicles like Rogel Dawns, like Leman Russes. But it is important to note that this strategy can, as with many of the quick tip tacticas that I like to build, come in at different tiers. So the gold tier is you do this with loads of heavy armor, you have the dedicated command squad, the dedicated 10-man squad, dedicated Creed, and they, and that's the most points intensive, but potentially the most robust. That's your gold tier. I would say your silver tier, your silver package, is where you still have the big tanks, but you're putting Creed inside of an existing blob, so there's a bit more risk involved there. But as you said, you can manage that risk, and it can actually play into your strategy, into your game-winning strategy. Then we've got bronze tier. This is where you can have Creed in a dedicated blob, or just part of a regular blob. But we don't do this with big, expensive armor. We do this with cheap armor that often doesn't get an order. For example, Hydras. Think about this for a second. You could have, let's say, 4 Leman Russes, 4 tanks, maybe a couple of Dawn tank commanders and a couple of regular Leman Russes, or a couple of Leman Russes and a couple of regular Leman Russes. Well, you've got 4 heavy tanks, however you want to do it. Okay, so you've got your 4 tanks, you've got your 80 infantry, 60 to 80 infantry, Creed's chucked in there with one of them, so just a quick 65-point add-on. You might not even bother with grand strategies with this one. And then you've got a bit of artillery sat at the back. You'll probably have plenty of points left over. Chuck 3 Hydras in your list. 95 points each. And normally, they don't get orders. And the reason they normally don't get orders is because your tank commander's there with his butt buddy. It's like his other Leman Russ, his other Rogel Dawn. And they're that nice, neat package there. But what if we want to just add in a bunch of cheap armor? What if we just want to be able to order 3 Hydras? What if we want to be able to order 3 Chimeras with infantry inside? This still works. Creed can still do that. In fact, you can do more than 3 transports when you think about it, because the platoon command squad can still benefit from the whole flexible command thing. In fact, I've just done some quick maths here, and please feel free to correct me and check that my reasoning is right. But if we go for 4 blobs of Cadians, and we put a Castellan and a command squad in one unit, and we go for Creed and a command squad in another unit, giving us shitloads of orders, and then we have a couple of the siege guns, and then we have 3 Hydras, a couple of tank commanders, and a couple of Leman Vanquishers, we still have like 30 points left over, 30, 35 points left over. That would be enough for a commissar to go and reserve some secondary game. And that would get you an army with 7 vehicles, 80 infantry, and 2 artillery pieces, and secondary game all sorted out. And you could just be ordering all of those vehicles. I think there's enough orders for all the units there. There might be one or two short, but there's a lot of orders going around that army for a lot of units. And I think that's where the strength of the Creed command blob, that's where the hidden strength might be. I haven't field tested this yet, so it may not pan out, but I think you can use this as a dedicated command element in a traditional sense, but I think you could also use it to unlock additional cheap armor that is worth more than the paper it's written on and actually can do damage. Now, I've thrown a lot at you, so let me try and condense it all down and summarize it. The Creed command blob is a cost-effective way of getting lots of orders into your army, effectively solving the order bottleneck and giving you a great boost to the order economy. It works by taking Ursula Creed and a Cadian command squad and also a unit of Cadians and combining them all together. You leverage the Grand Strategist enhancement and the flexible command stratagem so that you can then get this blob to do 5 orders to any regiment or squadron unit. Just really, really a huge amount of orders. We can basically get the cost of flexible command down from 2 CP to 0 CP using a combination of the Tactical Genius ability on Creed's data sheet and the ability to gain CP using Voxcasters. There are a number of ways of implementing this tactic. You can either have a dedicated squad sat at the back, hold your home objective, doing the orders out, or you could just add Creed to an existing blob to try and keep costs down. The reason you might go for one over the other is if you go for the dedicated squad, it's going to be more protected. If you just go for adding Creed onto essentially a front line blob, it's going to be a lot cheaper, but you could end up risking your orders being taken out of the game. Overall, this is a great way of supporting either your heavy armor or actually leveraging this to get lots of cheap armor into your list to really overwhelm the enemy with just lots and lots of tanks. However you slice it, the Creed command blob is a great way of getting a lot of orders into your guard army. And as a result, it's going to be a huge force multiplier. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think this tactic has merit, or is there another way that you would try and implement this? And don't forget, if you've enjoyed today's video, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.